Certainly creating the standards, defining for people, look, this is the way we treat each other. This is the way we feel about each other. This is how we solve problems. This is how we interact day to day. This is how we work together. That's also a leader's responsibility.
Hi everyone, I'm Tracy O'Rourke.
And I'm Elizabeth Swan.
And we are from GoLean6Sigma.com, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast, where we bring you fabulous apps, polls, news, books, and people so you can build your problem-solving muscles.
You know, our guest today helps run a company that makes employee awards.
That would be super cool to do.
Made me wish I had more awards.
Well, for now, I'm giving you this coffee. So come join me in our private dining room. We'll discuss what you've done to deserve an award.
Okay.
So, Elizabeth, I know awards are on the menu, but what else do we have in store today?
So this week I got to interview Gary Peterson, VP of Operations for O.C. Tanner Company in Utah. He's also a lean practitioner and a fantastic storyteller. So tune in to hear about his unorthodox hiring process for this award-building manufacturer. This month's poll was about the kind of coaching that people are getting, and we were both surprised by the results. In the news, we've got a trombone player who saved the Army $10 million in 1 year. And finally, we've got a question from a listener who wants to know if organizations need a black belt.
Very cool. Sounds like a great lineup.
Yes.
Remember to stay tuned for this month's coupon code in order to get a discount on GoLean6Sigma.com's online training.
Let's get to the poll.
The results of this poll were not what we expected, were they, Elizabeth?
No, we were both surprised on this one. And just to recap, the question was, who is your continuous improvement coach? And the results were, in last place, I have an internal coach I meet with regularly at 1.3%. I have a coach but never see or meet with them, came in at 2.7%. An external coach meets with me regularly, came in at 3.4%. Almost a third of respondents said they designed their own coaching by attending webinars, etc. And the big winner was, I don't have a coach, but I wish I did. 53%. That's more than half. We were totally surprised at how many people have no support out there.
Well, I must say that this poll did actually sadden me a little bit because people don't have coaches and they've even had to coach themselves. How sad is that? That they actually, 28% of the respondents have to coach themselves and 53% want their own coach, but they don't have one. That tells me there's a huge gap in the support that people need and a gap in coaching people. And ideally, we want leaders to be coaching people. So that really made me sad. And we're seeing this trend out in the field as well. There seems to be more inquiries about getting coaching for leaders. So that's good news. And it's really an important part of building problem-solving muscles.
It is. It is. So given those results, we've got a new poll for our listeners regarding coaching. So the question is, what do you value most in a coach? And the options are when they tell me how to proceed, when they let me bounce ideas off them, when they make it safe to make mistakes, when they correct my work for me, when they connect my work to the bigger picture. And this time you can select all that apply. So please visit our site, enter your preferences, and we'll talk about the results next month. And always, the results of our polls are produced in either a Pareto chart or a bar chart, but we'll give you some picture of how people responded. I'm Elizabeth Swan, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast. We'd love your feedback. Please leave us a review on iTunes or our website, and don't forget to subscribe. Up next, it's In the News.
Okay, Elizabeth, so I have to be honest. This was the most interesting thing that you talked about as part of the menu today that I am dying to hear about. And that is, how do you get from trombone playing to saving the Army $10 million?
This story comes to us from the U.S. Army. I'm just as intrigued as you. And it was written by Amy Parr. And the focus is Lean Six Sigma Black Belt Kelly Wheeler. The story grabbed my attention because it involved healthcare, process improvement, the Army, and music. And the money savings are huge. She got over $10 million saved last year. But what's more interesting is this woman's journey. So she got a master's in music playing the trombone. I'm just going to stop for a moment. Just take that in. I actually wanted to play the trombone. My mother made me play the flute. But anyway, she got a master's in playing the trombone. Then she joined the Army to pay off student loans. Then she ends up in the U.S. Army Band. So clearly she's got some chops, right, playing the trombone. Then she decides to get her master's in business administration, right? So she's taken a turn here. That leads her to switch gears and become a management analyst for the Army. And that leads her to work in the military medical system. And when we're talking about coaches and mentors, and she had a mentor. So she calls out Lieutenant Colonel Rolando Castro as the one who encouraged her to keep working in military healthcare. So of course, she pursued another master's. This time, it's in healthcare administration. She's a brave woman. She ventured way outside her comfort zone. And given the poll results about coaching, I'm even more convinced the power of mentorship. The Army obviously, or probably has a more formal structure around mentorship, which means organizations also need to make it more formal. Kelly Wheeler clearly made her own way, but she acknowledges the support that helped shape her path. And she's now a mentor to others, and that brings us back to the 10 million. Her coaching of other team leads, other candidates, resulted in more than 10 million in financial benefit, improved healthcare quality, lowered cost, and increased medical access. And she's still playing the trombone. So there's something to the synergy of music and medicine here. It's a great article, and we provided you the link. I hope reading it inspires some of you out there to become a coach, become a mentor, and help others have the kind of impact that Kelly Wheeler has had.
Wow, Kelly makes us all look like underachievers. Way to go, Kelly. Hey, maybe she'd be up for a podcast interview, Elizabeth. What do you think?
I think we should just float that out there, Tracy. Let's see what happens.
Cool. I'm Tracy O'Rourke, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast. In a short while, we'll get to hear Elizabeth's interview with Gary Peterson, VP of Operations for O.C. Tanner Company. Next up, it's a question from one of our listeners.
This question is somewhat related to the poll question about coaching, and you took this one initially, Tracy, so why don't you talk about the question and how you answered it?
Yes, the question was, does there have to be a black belt at the company that I work for? And my answer is no, there doesn't have to be a black belt by name. Ideally, you do want support typically that a black belt does provide, and that is typically internal coaching to help build problem-solving muscles of all the employees. But it doesn't have to be a black belt. It could be a leader. It could be a supervisor or a sensei. There's lots of names for this type of role. So the name isn't as important as the role. And yes, I'd highly recommend that the role of coaching be filled internally because that makes coaches more accessible. And ideally, you want them to be educated in process improvement, especially if you are going to them as a coach.
So this is really a continuing theme this episode, the need for leaders to become mentors. And I agree the name is unimportant, but what matters is that this mentorship is structured and continuous.
It's time to announce the coupon code.
This code is for 20% off any of our Lean Six Sigma training and certification courses. That's white belt, yellow belt, green belt, black belt, and lean training.
So if you joined us at the Just in Time Cafe, just use coupon code 20croissant. Okay, I'm about to spell it. That's 20CROISSANT during checkout. Make sure to use it soon since the coupon code will expire in 1 month, August 15th, 2018. Coming up next is today's special. Elizabeth, give us a little preview of your interview with Gary Peterson.
I heard about Gary from Richard Sheridan. He was a guest last month. He wrote Joy Incorporated. He's president of Menlo Innovations. And both these leaders reacted to the inadequacy of the job interview by developing radically different hiring process. All I will tell you is that Gary's involves a little bit of torture. And as I said, he's a wonderful storyteller, so you definitely want to stay tuned.
So he's involving a little bit of torture in hiring process? I thought it was already torturous.
Gets worse, but more effective. Hi, and welcome to today's special. Our guest is Gary Peterson, Executive Vice President of Supply Chain and Production for the O.C. Tanner Company. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you. It's very nice to be with you.
For those of you who have not heard of the O.C. Tanner Company, they make software and products that help people express gratitude toward their employees. Gary's worked for the O.C. Tanner Company for 30 years. Prior to his current role, Gary's held an impressively diverse set of jobs with the O.C. Tanner Company: manager of market research, manufacturing change facilitator, where he was instrumental in moving the operation from batch to lean, resulting in winning the Shingo Prize, vice president of manufacturing, marketing vice president of award development, and vice president of research and professional services. O.C. Tanner also received the AME Excellence Award, and Gary has been inducted into the AME Hall of Fame. Gary serves on the executive advisory board of the Shingo Institute, and he is a Shingo examiner. His experience with lean enterprise sends him around the globe, helping others improve their operations. Gary holds an MBA and a bachelor's degree in statistics from Brigham Young University. He recharges his batteries by snowboarding, playing basketball, hiking, watching his 18-year-old daughter play soccer, and being with his 7, soon-to-be 9, we're skipping right past 8, grandchildren. We're lucky to find out about Gary from our recent podcast guest, Richard Sheridan, author of Joy Incorporated and CEO of Menlo Innovations. Richard identified Gary as another force for good when it comes to a joyful workplace. And so great to have you here, Gary. And there are no flies on you. You're busy.
Yeah, it is very nice to be with you. And what an honor to have Richard say that about the O.C. Tanner Company, about our work here. It's probably the thing that I'm the most proud of is that when he was here, he's been here several times. When anyone comes here, the thing that they seem to really be intrigued by is the high engagement of our people and the positive attitudes that they have. Everyone's happy and smiling and working hard, and it's a really good culture.
The culture was a very big message. You're right when Richard talked about you. So what do you think the role of a leader is regarding culture?
Yeah, I think the leader every day is responsible for establishing the way he or she wants things to feel in the facility. I think people really they follow kind of my lead in terms of my behavior. In fact, I'll tell you an interesting story. One day, one of our team leaders in our vault came to see me. This was about 20 years ago. And she said to me, "Hey, whatever's wrong, you have to fix it." And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. She said, you look horrible and everybody knows it. And it's sending a shockwave through the factory. And whatever it is, it's time for you to fix it. And then she left. And man, what an incredible thing for someone to do, for someone to come and point out to me that I don't look right and people are noticing. And I think absolutely everyone takes their daily vibe from their leaders. You know, how are things going to be today? How do we all feel? The other thing I would say is that certainly creating the standards, defining for people, look, this is the way we treat each other. This is the way we feel about each other. This is how we solve problems. This is how we interact day to day. This is how we work together. That's also a leader's responsibility. That's
a great example. What's fascinating also is that the culture already had a lot of great things involved. If someone could come up to you and say that, like that's an amazing statement right there. Just for our listeners, I want to also point out that because of your lean work, you managed to do things like reduce the time it takes to create a custom award from 26 days down to 20 minutes. So incredibly impressive. So I want to just back up, let people know there's something going on. The culture is intertwined with this amazing improvement work.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's just interesting, just in terms of you and I having this conversation, and you're in what was, you said, your old office because you moved out. Can you just let the listeners know what you did?
Yeah. So, golly, it's been about 4 or 5 years ago now, I think. I was trying to challenge our group leaders who are manager levels. They each have about 20 or 30 people, 2 or 3 different teams reporting to them. I asked them to connect more closely with their team members and to not be so separate from them because of their office. And I told them if I could get anything I wanted, it would be that you would do your day-to-day work right in the middle of your work cells. And that very same day, one of our group leaders, Shane Percival, he's a big guy. He's bigger than me. He's like 6'8" or something like that. He moved his computer station right out onto the floor, right in the middle of his team. And I knew it was his because I walked by and it was higher than I was, right? Like, Shane moved out here. And I felt so good about that, and that I came in and I immediately pulled my standing workstation out of my office and put it out in the common area that's out in front of my area here. And one by one, my vice presidents and directors all followed suit. They all moved out, some of them immediately, same day. Some others kind of more reluctantly. They didn't want to give up their office. But now all of my directors and vice presidents are in a little cluster cell that's in the middle of our huddle area, where all of our team leaders and group leaders and maintenance techs, everybody in our value stream huddles all gather throughout the day. We're right there in the middle of that. And all of our offices are now incredibly well-used conference rooms. In fact, I'm looking down through the glass right now, and the three offices that are lined up with mine, they all have various meetings going on in them, which is wonderful.
It is.
And now we're out on the floor, very accessible. Now, I always had my door open, but I'm amazed how much more foot traffic I get now compared to what I got before. I think there is something about being in an office that kind of makes you a little bit standoffish.
Even if there's an open door, and that's, very, the open door policy, kind of iconic, but there's still a wall. There's still walls around you.
Yep.
It's such a great example because it's just really shows that what you say obviously matters as a leader. But your first story showed how you look makes a big difference. And the second example is what you do. You moved, literally, you got amongst the employees. And how interesting, because whether you measure or not, you certainly can feel the difference that people come by and interact with you way more than when you were in your office.
Yeah, actually, after we got out there, there were some managers who expressed concern to the vice president that they didn't feel safe coming and having confidential conversations with them out in the huddle area with everybody else kind of around there. They were a little bit worried about the new configuration. So I put together a little confidential survey that I had one of the group leaders do with everybody. And the simple question was, how do you feel about the new configuration? And one of the last questions was, do you think the leaders should go back to their offices? And there were various people who expressed, various concerns, and you need to figure out how to handle confidentiality and things like this. But the common response that everybody said is, you can't go back to your office. What a great answer. You can't go back, but there's some things you got to fix. So
that's lovely. And the other thing that strikes me is I work in a lot of different environments, visiting clients, and I remember hearing things like, I say, can we meet? Can we do something? As well, conference rooms are really hard to find here. We don't have many of them. And what you did was you and your the other leadership just increased the amount of conference rooms. So there's lots of places to go and have confidential conversations.
That's right. And the reality is, I wasn't in my office that much. Right. I might be in meetings with the executive team, or I might be out on the factory floor or in a meeting somewhere else or doing whatever. This room was actually going wasted. It's got a nice conference table in it, and now, it was not a good use of space as my office, quite frankly.
And I think that is the rule in a lot of office buildings, that the offices are a waste of space. People are out. If they're good, they're out amongst the,
right,
the process and seeing what's going on.
Golly, if they're using their office a lot, I'd be worried about that.
Yeah, that's another signal. It's another bad look. So just out of curiosity, I also know from Richard, he has an interesting hiring process. You have an interesting hiring process. So would you mind describing it and telling us why it works?
Oh, absolutely. So we hire 100% to culture. We don't worry about job skills. We figure we use training within industry, so we do a very good job of teaching skills. We can get people where we want them, even machinists. We can train machinists. I hear a lot of discussion coming out of the National Association of Manufacturing about we got to figure out how to get the schools to give us better trained people and so forth. I'd rather train them myself, quite honestly. So we hire to culture, and we always hire through temp agencies. So we have two temp agencies who vie for our business. And if we have a job opening, say 2 jobs on second shift, they'll bring in about 12 people who they have pre-qualified and they believe we will hire. They think they match our culture. So that's nice. We don't have to worry about trying to figure that out. They bring them in the door, and we take them on a tour, first of all, throughout our facility, which is intentionally too long. We have people going along with them. We want to see if, what do they do when they start to get bored? Do they start to get bored? Does the phone come out? Does their mind go elsewhere? Do they stop paying attention? So we're looking for that. And some people, I would say about a 10th to 15% of the people disqualify themselves on that tour. And then we go into a conference room where we have a haphazard set of tables set up, and we play a game with them with Sticklebrick. It's a children's toy that's got all the little points on it that you can squish them together and they stick together, but they don't quite go together right. I don't know if you're familiar with the Sticklebrick, but they're supposed to create a product to the specifications of the client, and they volunteer for jobs on this line. And the client is in the room, and the client asks for a certain number of parts, and we ask them to start producing, but their process is horrible. And they run for about 5 to 6 minutes. They fail, and the customer's not happy about it. And we ask them what happened, and we let them talk about it. And just briefly, just like 3 minutes or something, we ask them to go again. We run for another about 5 minutes, they fail. We run for another 5 minutes, they fail. And we keep giving them small little amounts of time in between each iteration to make some changes or corrections and so forth. And we do this for about 45 minutes to 55 minutes. And the whole time, it doesn't sound very friendly, but the intensity in the room is being ratcheted up. The customer's becoming more and more demanding, and the intensity is becoming more and more real. And it's interesting to see that these people, they forget that they're in an interview, and they start to behave very naturally how they behave in a difficult situation. There are some of them who start to get frustrated and angry and start to blame and start to, be difficult with other people, and we don't want them. There are other people who curl up in a little ball and they just want the whole thing to end. They're not happy with difficult situations, with problem solving. But in a group of 12 people, there'll be 1 or 2 whose eyes light up, who get energized by the whole process, and who we notice that other people who aren't sure what to do and who are uncomfortable start to kind of migrate towards them because they feel some security in being with them and being around them. And those are the people we hire. We have 3 to 6 people from the hiring teams who are in there just watching this entire exercise. And when we're done, they are 100% agreed. We want those 2 right there. And there have been times when I've walked past the simulation at the end and they had 3 jobs open. And I said, well, how did you do? And they'll say, we didn't find anybody.
Ooh.
And that's a perfectly acceptable outcome for us. Or there have been other times if we had 2 jobs open and they say, well, we found 3 and we're hiring 3. And they don't even ask permission. The reality is if we find somebody good out there, we're not going to let them get away. We'll find something to do with them. I'll also tell you this. So we put our exempt employees through the same thing. So if someone wants to be an engineer here, or they want to be a group leader, or they want to be a buyer, they go into the same simulation with the hourly people, and we're watching them too. We had a lady who had applied for a second shift group leader job, who, when I interviewed her, I thought, wow, she is awesome. She's going to take us to a new level. That's what I was thinking. And I went in and watched the simulation when she came and played the game, and she was horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. Oh, it would have been such a mistake to have hired her. So then the temp agency, it's still their employee for 3 months. And so during that 3 months, we're doing job skill training. We're teaching them. They join a team, and we're waiting for the team to throw their arms around them, claim them as their own. So even after 3 months, we don't convert them to a full-time employee until the team is saying, this one's ours. We love him. He's fantastic. And if that doesn't happen, we start having some hard conversations and they end up not staying with us. We do the same thing with our exempt employees. For the first 3 months, we don't hire a buyer and put them in as a buyer. We don't hire a group leader and give them a team or an engineer and give them an assignment. We spend 3 months internally doing a project. They're given an assignment that cuts across borders where they have to interact with client services and with IT, with human resources and marketing and so forth. But they have no authority to solve the problem that they're given. They're just given this problem. And we're waiting to see if they can attract followers. We're waiting to see if people want to help them when they have no obligation to do so. And it's interesting, a person in that sort of situation who doesn't have title or authority, you've got to have other skill sets that make people want to follow you. If you don't have that, you're not going to make it through our exercise.
And that's a problem-solving must-have because you don't have positional authority and you do have to work with others. So
right.
What are you going to do? How are you going to get people engaged? And what does that look like?
That's right. So when they make 4 presentations throughout the course of the 3 months, and we do want them to be successful at their project. There's a real problem we want them to solve, but we're actually paying attention to how many people start coming to their presentation to cheer them on, to show their agreement, to be part of what they're doing. Because they could be successful at their project, they could hit a home run, but if nobody cares about them, we're not going to hire them. And so they know when they come that they could be gone in 3 months. Or if we promote them from another department, they know they could end up going back to their previous department in that 3-month period.
So fascinating. Richard's description of the hiring process was 2 people in a room lying to each other for a couple of hours. Back to your interview, and this person seemed great and just failed miserably. Mm-hmm. Just out of curiosity, does anyone go through that first simulation piece? Do they ever come back? Does anyone ever try to come through again, realizing I got to come have a different game to play?
Yes, they do. Because we get about 55% of our employees come from recommendations from people inside the company. And a lot of them are family, nieces, nephews, cousins, and so forth. And they come back and they want to try to find a place. But it's tough. It's tough to get on here. You have to be the right fit. And it's interesting. We did a survey in one of our engagement surveys a couple of years ago. We asked a question. One of the questions we asked was, would you recommend OC Tanner to your family as a place to work or something like that? And we were getting a lot of negative responses that we didn't understand. And so we went out and did some focus groups to say to people, hey, help us understand the response to this question. And the answer was immediate. Hey, I got family who don't belong here.
It wasn't for their sake. It was for yours.
Right. My worst nightmare would be for some of my family to come work here.
Terrible.
So we thought, okay. So we changed the question to, if your family member fit our culture, would you recommend them to work at OC Tanner? And then all the responses went positive. So I guess I'm saying that when we have 52% of employees that come from referrals, and they're typically people who our employees are saying, well, one, the reason they recommend is they think it would be good for their family member, but they don't make recommendations that don't fit the culture generally.
That's great. I think another thing that comes through in your description of this whole hiring process is you're looking to see if people play well with others. Back to that, I think Richard puts that out there a lot too, that these are basic things you should have known since you were a little kid. And how others respond to you, sort of you're looking for, is someone sort of looking to promote themselves and not work with other folks. Just out of curiosity, when you walk around and you have these, I love this idea of the tour that's too long, and you're looking to see if people are getting on their phones or what are they doing. What do the best people do? What do they do when this thing gets too long?
Oh, they don't lose intensity. They don't lose energy. Their eyes are wide and bright. They've got smiles. They're fascinated. They're trying to take it all in. They're looking from side to side. They don't want to miss anything. I mean, there are people like that, and that's who we want to attract and bring in here. And they also notice, though, they all notice how happy everyone is. I always enjoy seeing the fascination on not just applicants for work, but like tour visitors as they see people. In fact, I'll tell you, my daughter was doing a high school project just a few weeks ago, and she asked me if she could come down and shoot some video of people working in a factory in an office environment because she wants to do an emotional contrast kind of message. I was like, sure, come on down. So she came down. We were walking through the factory trying to find a place for her to shoot, and we'd walked past about 4 teams, and she said, Dad, this isn't going to work. Everyone here is happy. I said, yeah, everyone's happy. What did you want? She says, well, I'm sorry. I was just imagining, typical factory that people would be miserable as, oh, this isn't going to work for you. We were standing in front of a line at the time, and this was on our second shift. And I said, well, what did you want to see when you looked up this line? She says, well, I don't want to see people smiling. And there was a trainer was standing next to us doing some work, and she heard it, and she shouted down the line, hey, everyone needs to look unhappy. And everyone broke out laughing. They all started laughing, which made me so proud, to have my daughter understand the impact of what's possible, I think, in a work environment.
That's a great story. I love that. It reminds me of the classic Lucille Ball assembly line with the chocolates. So I just want to read this. I got this off the O.C. Tanner website, and I want to read what I believe is the company's purpose statement.
Okay.
So our listeners can hear it. We help companies appreciate people who do great work because celebrating great work inspires people to invent, to create, to discover. And when people are inspired, companies grow.
Yeah.
And I wanted to read that because those of us in the continuous improvement business, we know that great companies start with a clear purpose.
Yes.
And this one is clear and compelling.
Yes.
And it just reminds me how just critical it is for people to believe in that, to hear it and live it.
So let me just say something about that. Our people feel like the work that they do, that it matters. And even if they're only doing a 50-second process, we want them saying this 50 seconds is part of making something powerful happen to somebody. I've got to do my job right. And part of my, what I hand to my customer, who is an internal producer, has to be perfect, has to be right so that they can do their job well. And I also believe that purpose, that what we do matters, really helps drive the daily continuous improvement that every person is a part of. I think they feel it intrinsically rewarding. I know that it's intrinsically rewarding to make improvements to their work, but it's not just because they're making work better, but because they're making work that matters. Mm. They're making this company more able to do what it does. Yeah. One day I was standing behind a lady in one of our watch assembly lines, and she was working away. She was humming and kind of bouncing. She was in a very good mood, little Filipino gal. So I was looking over her, watching the screen and seeing what she was doing. And when she finished her job, I said, Felly, how are you doing today? She says, I'm great. And I said, well, I can see that. Tell me why are you so great today? And I thought maybe she'd say something about her grandchildren, or, I didn't know what was her drive for the day. But she literally pointed at the screen and the name of the recipient on the screen, the guy who is receiving, she said, because I just finished this 15-year award for, and she read the name of the guy off the screen. And when he gets this award, it's going to make his day.
That's lovely.
I don't have to worry about Felly's quality, right? She's got a higher purpose, a higher reason for doing what she does. I don't have to worry about, is she going to be involved with making continuous improvement happen? All of my concerns go away.
That's just uplifting. It's so great. And it's really fun talking to you. And I hate I hate to draw it to a close. I could talk to you for quite some time, and I'm sure you've got other stuff to do. But anyway, these are great stories. I am so enjoying this, and I'm so enjoying hearing about it. And I hope that Tracy and I and other members could come tour someday. We'll put in a request and check it out. How could our listeners find you or communicate with you if they wanted, Gary?
Probably the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. You can just use my email address. It's gary.peterson@octanner.com, and Peterson is SON.
If you're interested, OC Tanner does host Lean Tours. They regularly host the Shingo Institute, AME, and they are a go and see site for McKinsey Consulting. If you put in a request, you could see their culture in action. You've been listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast. My guest today has been Gary Peterson of OC Tanner. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with our listeners today, Gary.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for having me, Elizabeth.
Be sure to join our next webinar, How to Coach Problem Solvers to Build Their Soft Skills, more on our theme of effective coaching, and check out a great success story webinar by Brenda McIsaac of Cape Cod Child Development, who managed to improve a process by 100%. We don't see those numbers very often, Tracy. 100.
Wow, I hate to see the baseline data on that one, but great job, Brenda. And you know what? If you haven't picked up on the theme of coaching is important, coaching isn't happening, and coaching is needed, tune into the next episode of the Just in Time Cafe, where we interview Holly Jensen, who I'll be seeing shortly at the Coaching Summit, sponsored by Lean Frontiers in Seattle, Washington on July 18th and 19th. Thanks for tuning in with us here at the Just in Time Cafe.
Come on back in 2 weeks.